The first thing that told me humans were different was the sound they made before a fight. Not silence, not ritual, not the slow breath of a warrior preparing his mind for death. Laughter. I heard it before I saw them. A long corridor in Staging Bay 11, the air carrying the sharp chemical smell of armor compound and recycled oxygen, and underneath it, that sound, loud and irregular and entirely out of place. My translator unit processed it in half a second and filed it under non-combat vocalization, social bonding function. I stood at the entrance of the bay and stared. There were 9 of them, human soldiers. Most were only half-dressed in their combat gear, plates loose at the shoulders, boots not yet sealed. One of them, a shorter one with close-cropped hair and dark skin, was holding something aggressively orange between 2 fingers and eating it with the focus of someone diffusing a device. Another had his helmet off and was talking with his hands, wide gestures that made no tactical sense. The others watched him and made the sound again. Laughter. In a staging bay, 40 minutes before a combat drop. I am Vael. I am Kethar. My people have been fighting wars since before humanity discovered that fire could be carried from one place to another. We do not laugh before combat. We do not laugh during combat. We do not laugh after combat until the wounded are counted, the dead are named, and the silence has been held for the appropriate number of cycles. There is a word in our language, veth al, which means the precise emotional state of readiness before a battle. It requires stillness. It requires the complete suppression of everything that is not focus. These humans had apparently never heard of veth al. I had been told, before this assignment, that serving alongside a human unit would be an honor. The council elder who delivered this news used exactly that word, honor, with the particular emphasis that Kethar officials use when they mean something else entirely. I have served the Kethar Assembly for 62 years. I know when a word is a weapon dressed in formal clothing. This was a demotion. Not in rank. Never in rank. That would require acknowledgement, paperwork, a reason. This was the quieter kind. The kind where you are given a posting so far outside your expertise and your dignity that the message is clear without ever being spoken. I had disagreed, formally and on record, with the Assembly's decision to pursue mineral contracts in the Veth system before the indigenous population had been assessed for displacement risk. I had filed the objection correctly. I had followed every protocol. 3 weeks later, I was assigned to Joint Cooperative Unit 7, attached to a human infantry company, effective immediately. They called it bridge building. I called it what it was. I crossed the threshold into Staging Bay 11, and the laughter did not stop. Several of the humans glanced at me. One of them, the one with the orange food, held the remaining piece out in my direction, an offering. I catalogued this as either a social greeting or a territorial display and elected to ignore it. The commanding officer of the unit found me before I found her. She came from my left, appeared at my shoulder, and spoke before I had processed her arrival. "Sergeant Dara Ose," she said, "you must be our Kethar liaison. Vale, right?" She extended her hand. I knew enough about human customs to recognize this as a greeting gesture. What I was not prepared for was what came next. When I extended my own hand, 4-fingered, considerably larger than hers, she did not shake it in the formal cross grip I had studied. She grabbed it, pressed once firmly, and then, with her other hand, patted the back of mine. She touched my hand, uninvited, without rank acknowledgement, without the 17-breath pause that Kethar protocol requires before physical contact with a superior officer. I went very still. In Kethar culture, uninvited physical contact from a subordinate falls into one of 2 categories. The first is profound disrespect, punishable by formal censure and rank reduction. The second is a form of desperate intimacy reserved for family members facing imminent death. Sergeant Ose did not look like she thought she was dying. She looked like she was having a fine morning. I decided, in that moment, that humans either had no concept of disrespect or had a concept of it so different from mine that the words stopped meaning the same thing. Both possibilities required further study. I filed the hand pat under unknown social protocol and kept my face neutral. Vale, I confirmed. Kethar Assembly, Tactical Liaison. Great, she said, and then she looked back toward her unit and raised her voice. Reyes, stop offering the alien your chips. The one with the orange food lowered his hand without embarrassment. Osei looked back at me. Don't take it personally. He offers everyone his chips. It's how he says hello. I processed this. He greets individuals by offering food. Yep. Is this standard for human soldiers? She tilted her head. For Reyes it is. This was not an answer to my question. I filed it alongside the hand pat and resolved to seek clarification later. The soldier who had been telling the story with his hands drifted over. He was tall, with light brown hair cut close on the sides, a diagonal scar across his left forearm that had been treated but not cosmetically corrected, a choice that meant something, though I did not yet know what. He nodded at me with his chin, a gesture I recognized as informal acknowledgement. Corporal Ben Park, he said. You read the mission brief. 17 times, I said. He smiled. Another one of those tooth-showing expressions. Wow. Okay, we should probably have a conversation about that before the drop. About the mission brief. About reading things 17 times. I stared at him. He did not appear to be joking. He also did not appear to be serious. He occupied some third category that I had no framework for. I added him to my growing list of humans requiring further study. Osei had moved back toward the unit and was checking the seal on her shoulder plate. Without looking up, she said, Vielle, we drop in 38, gear check in 10. If you need anything from stores, now's the time. I did not need anything from stores. My equipment was prepared, checked, and cross-checked. It had been ready since the previous evening, as proper military discipline required. I was watching the soldier called Reyes finish the orange food. He had a small amount of the orange dust left on his fingers. He looked at it, then at me, then at his fingers again, and then he wiped them on the outside of his armor plating. I added this to the file. The file was growing faster than I had anticipated. One of the other soldiers, a woman with her hair pulled back severely and a look of permanent assessment on her face, caught me watching. She did not look away. Neither did I. After a moment she said, You're going to be cataloging us the whole mission, aren't you? I am observing for tactical purposes, I said. Sure, she said. I'm Corporal Nina Walsh, and just so you know, we're going to be cataloging you too. This was, I decided, either a threat or a greeting, possibly both. Among humans, I was beginning to understand the distance between those two things was shorter than I had been taught. Osei called the unit to gear check. They moved, efficiently I noted, more efficiently than the chaos of the previous minutes had suggested. Plates locked, boots sealed, weapons checked in the practice sequence that soldiers everywhere eventually settle into. The laughter stopped, or at least quieted, replaced by the low professional murmur of people who knew their work. But it did not stop entirely. The tall one, Reyes, said something under his breath to the soldier beside him, and the soldier pressed his lips together like he was trying not to make the sound. I stood in the staging bay and watched them and understood, with the particular clarity that comes from being far outside your frame of reference, that I was looking at something I had no word for. Not discipline, not indiscipline, something between and outside both. Osei finished her gear check and turned to face me fully. She had dark eyes, steady and assessing, and there was something in them that I recognized across species lines, the look of someone who has been in enough bad situations to stop being surprised by them. She looked at me for a moment without speaking. Then she did the thing I had no framework for. She closed one eye, the left one, just for a moment, then opened it again. My translator unit processed this in half a second and returned. Wink, human gesture, informal, multiple possible meanings including shared understanding, acknowledgement, playfulness, mild deception, greeting. I stared at her. She had already turned back to her unit. I filed the wink under threat display non-hostile, purpose unclear, and followed them toward the drop bay, because I was here, and the mission was beginning, and whatever these creatures were, whatever strange, laughing, chip-eating, winking species they represented, I had been assigned to keep them alive. I told myself that was the only reason I followed. I was wrong, but I did not know that yet. The briefing room inside the carrier was not designed for a species of my height. I discovered this when I sat down at the table and my knees pressed against the underside in a way that made a sound I would rather not have made. No one commented on this. Reyes pressed his lips together again. I ignored him. Osei stood at the front of the room beside a display screen. The mission details populated across it in Standard, and in the 2 secondary languages the unit carried between them. I had reviewed this information 17 times. I had cross-referenced it against the Kethar tactical database, run 3 probability models, and prepared what I considered a thorough and complete approach to the problem. The problem was this: a research outpost on a mid-atmosphere platform above a gas giant had gone dark 46 hours earlier. There were 11 personnel inside. The platform's external communication array had been destroyed. Not failed, destroyed, which meant someone or something had been there and had not wanted the platform talking to anyone. We were going in through the maintenance access on the platform's lower ring, extracting the 11 personnel, and leaving through the primary dock before whoever had destroyed the comms array came back to finish the job. 46 hours of silence. 11 people. A 3-hour extraction window. I had 17 subphases mapped out. Contingency trees for 42 different failure scenarios. 4 fallback positions with calculated retreat timelines. I had spent the previous night refining the secondary contingency for failure scenario 19, which I considered the most likely complication given the wind shear data at that atmospheric level. Osei finished her overview of the basic parameters and turned to me. Vale, you want to walk us through the Kethar tactical model you mentioned in your pre-mission notes? I stood. My knees hit the table again. I ignored this. I pulled up my approach on the display and began to walk through it. The 17 subphases. The contingency trees. Fallback position alpha with its 3 approach vectors. Fallback position beta. The wind shear calculations. Failure scenario 19 and its resolution protocol. The humans listened. They were good at listening, better than I had expected. No one interrupted. Several of them took notes on the small devices they carried. Osei watched the display with her arms crossed, and that assessing expression that I was already beginning to recognize as her baseline state. I finished. I stood and waited. Osei uncrossed her arms. "That's really thorough," she said. I waited. "Here's what we're actually going to do," she said. I sat down. My knees hit the table. She pulled up a new layer on the display, a much simpler one. 4 lines. 4 points. The platform schematic reduced to its most basic geometry. "We go in here," she said, pointing to the maintenance access. "We move to the personnel quarters on the inner ring. We extract everyone we can carry. We leave." I waited for the rest. There was no rest. "That is 4 steps," I said. 4 steps, she agreed. "Where are the contingency protocols?" Step 3. I looked at the display. Step 3 said, "Move through the central hub." Step 3 does not contain contingency protocols, I said. Step 3 is 4 words. Step 3 is where things get complicated, Corporal Park said from the far end of the table. So we left it open. I looked at him, then at Osei, then at the display. "You left it open," I said. "We work better that way," Osei said. She said it without apology, without the slight defensive softening that people use when they know they are saying something unreasonable. She said it the way someone states a fact they have tested and found reliable. The soldier called Reyes had produced a small marker from somewhere inside his armor. He was writing on his forearm. I watched this with the complete inability to look away that a person experiences when they observe something they cannot categorize. He was writing on his own skin. He was writing the 4 steps of the mission plan, on his forearm, with a marker that would dissolve in sweat within 2 hours. A battle plan, on a human body, in temporary ink. I looked at Osei. "If your plan is lost or degraded," "Then we know the plan," she said. She touched her temple with 2 fingers. "In here." "The plan is 4 words," I said. 3, Park corrected. "Step 3 is actually 2. I registered that I was being corrected on the word count of a 4-step battle plan by a man who seemed to find this situation mildly entertaining, and I made a decision that I was not going to examine too closely in that moment. I pulled my formal objection template from my internal file system. "I am registering a formal objection to the tactical approach as presented," I said. "The Kethar Assembly requires that all joint operations observe a minimum of 7 contingency phases. This plan does not meet." "Noted," Osei said. "I'll put it in the after-action report." She turned back to the display. "Reyes, stop writing on yourself." "Already done," Reyes said. He was not done. He was adding what appeared to be a small diagram. I looked at the 4 steps on the display. I looked at my 17 subphases, still open on the secondary panel. Walsh, the one who had told me she would be cataloging me, was watching from across the table. She had a particular quality of attention, the kind that does not announce itself but misses nothing. "You look like you want to say something else," she said. "I want to say 17 other things," I said. She almost smiled. "Not quite. Save them for the drop." I did not save them for the drop. But I did not say them either, because in the next moment Osei clapped her hands once. Sharp, brief, the sound of a decision being made, and the unit began moving with the efficiency I had noticed before, the one that appeared from nowhere when the serious part began. We boarded the drop craft in the correct sequence. The bay sealed. The atmospheric entry burn began. The platform came into view through the forward porthole, a gray ring hanging in the amber and brown atmosphere of the gas giant below it, small from this distance, impossibly fragile looking for something that was supposed to hold 11 lives. Reyes looked at the porthole. He had capped the marker and returned it to his breast pocket. "Okay," he said to no one in particular. "Let's go be helpful." We dropped. The maintenance access was where the schematic said it would be. It opened on the 3rd override attempt. The inner ring smelled of recycled air and something chemical that my sensors flagged as a fire suppressant recently discharged. The lights were at half capacity, which meant the main power had been partially cut. Planned, not accidental. Step 1, we were in. Step 2, move to personnel quarters, took 11 minutes. The corridors were clear. Too clear. The kind of clear that means something moved through here and cleared it, not the kind that means nothing happened. I said this to Osei in a low voice as we moved. She nodded once, which I had learned meant she had already come to the same conclusion and was filing it under active awareness. The personnel quarters were on the 4th ring. 7 of the 11 people were there, clustered in the far corner of the largest room, behind an overturned storage unit that one of them had clearly dragged into position as a barrier. They were in poor condition, dehydrated, frightened, covering the door with 2 small personal defense tools that would not have stopped anything serious. When Osei came through the door, they made sounds I recognized across species lines. Relief sounds, the same in every language I have encountered. She went to them, spoke quickly and quietly. Her voice changed in a way I had not heard in the briefing room. It dropped, softened, slowed. She had a different register for terrified civilians than for her unit, and the shift was immediate and completely unself-conscious. I noted this. I did not have a file for it yet. I created one. The other 4 personnel were in the technical hub, we learned. 2 of them were injured. The hub was on the opposite side of the platform, through the central ring. Step 3. Osei looked at me. I looked back at her. "Open," I said. "Open," she agreed. The central hub was where they were waiting for us. Not many. A 3-unit team, well armed, positioned at the hub's 3 entry points in a triangle that had been carefully calculated to cover all approaches. Professional, organized. The formation told me they had done this before, and that they expected whoever came through those doors to follow a predictable tactical pattern. They were not wrong to expect this. Most species follow predictable tactical patterns under pressure. The predictability comes from training, from protocol, from the 17 subphases that give a soldier's mind something to grip when everything else becomes uncertain. Osei put her fist up. We stopped. She looked at the entry points. She looked at her unit. She tilted her head at a very slight angle that I had no catalog entry for. Reyes looked at her. Something passed between them that required no words. Not a glance, not a gesture, something more like a frequency that two people who have survived enough things together begin to broadcast without meaning to. He looked at Park. Park looked at Walsh. Walsh exhaled through her nose once, the quiet sound of someone arriving at an understanding. None of this took more than 4 seconds. Osei pointed at the rightmost entry point with 2 fingers. Then she pointed at herself and the left. Then she looked at me and pointed at the center, and her expression said, "I know what I am asking. I know you know. Do it anyway." I had 17 contingency protocols for a situation like this. Not one of them suggested walking through the center entry of a 3-point hostile formation as deliberate distraction. I walked through the center entry. What followed was loud and brief, and impossible to narrate with the orderly sequence it did not possess. I can say that the formation broke the moment it became clear that 3 separate entry points were being used simultaneously. I can say that a triangle has no center it can defend when its own 3 points are occupied. I can say that the hostile unit, trained, professional, competent, had no contingency protocol for the specific situation of a 7-foot Kethar tactical liaison stepping through a door they had assumed would remain empty. I can say that when Osei's voice came over the unit channel 7 minutes later saying, "We have the hub, we have the other 4, move to dock," I felt something that I did not have a Kethar word for. The extraction to the primary dock took 19 minutes. The dock sealed behind us 30 seconds before the window closed. 11 people, alive. 4 steps. On the transport, I looked at Reyes's forearm. The ink had sweated off almost entirely. Only 2 words remained, and those were fading. He noticed me looking. "Works every time," he said. "The plan," I said slowly, "worked because the opposition had planned against something more complex." "Yep." "They had no framework for step 3. "Nobody does," he said pleasantly. "That's the whole point." I sat with this for the rest of the journey. The 17 subphases, the 42 contingency trees, the thing they called Step 3. I thought about the Kethar tactical database, which I had spent 40 years contributing to and refining. I thought about the marker, still in Reyes's breast pocket. I did not know yet what I was going to do with these thoughts. But I kept them, very carefully, the way you keep something that has not yet told you what it is. The lull came on the 3rd day of downtime, after the platform extraction, while we waited at a midpoint staging facility for the next operational assignment. The facility was functional rather than comfortable, pressed metal floors, shared sleeping quarters, a common area with 2 long tables and a cooking unit that could produce 9 different varieties of the same nutritional compound. The humans were untroubled by this. They arranged themselves in the common area the way water finds its level, filling the space with a noise level and a degree of personal sprawl that suggested they had claimed it. Park was at the far table running what appeared to be a small game on his handheld device. Walsh had a technical manual open and was reading it with the focused quiet of someone who uses reading the way other people use silence. 2 others from the unit, a broad-shouldered man named Garrett Cole and a younger one named Felix Marsh, were arguing with complete seriousness about something I had not yet been able to determine the subject of. I sat at the near end of the long table and observed. I had been assigned a sleeping space of adequate dimensions, and I had used it the previous 2 nights with the Kethar 6-hour rest protocol. I had run my maintenance checks and filed my preliminary after-action notes on the platform extraction. I had nothing tactically required of me at this moment, and this left me in a state that I found distinctly uncomfortable. Vethar, in Kethar, the state of purposelessness between purpose. It is not considered pleasant. It is considered a test of a warrior's discipline to endure it without reaching for distraction. I was enduring it. Reyes sat down across from me. He had a container of the orange food. He set it on the table between us, with the air of someone performing a gesture of great significance, while appearing to perform no gesture at all. He reached in, took one, held it between his fingers, looked at me. "They're corn chips," he said. "Salted, not spicy. Basically impossible to dislike." "I have no information on corn chips," I said. "That's what I'm here to fix." He placed one on the table in front of me, not in my hand, on the table, at a respectful distance, as if he understood, without being told, that I would prefer to make the choice myself. This was the most sophisticated social reading any human had demonstrated toward me since my arrival. I looked at him with new attention. Reyes was not the largest member of the unit, nor the most obviously capable. He had an easy quality of presence, the kind that does not push, does not perform, does not require observation, but his eyes were careful. I had learned to notice this about him in the 2 operations we had run together already. In motion, in the middle of chaos, his eyes were always 1 beat ahead of his body. I picked up the corn chip. I processed its chemical composition. Salt, corn flour, a compound oil, trace minerals. I ate it. The texture was wrong. The sound it made when I bit it was aggressive. The salt hit the receptors at the back of my upper palate in a way that was not unpleasant. Reyes watched me with the patience of someone who has waited for many reactions to many things. "Well," he said. "It is aggressively orange," I said. He pointed at me. "That's the correct take. That's exactly it." He ate one himself, satisfied with this exchange in a way I found disproportionate to its content. Across the room, Garrett Cole had produced a piece of paper from somewhere and was writing something on it, while Felix Marsh read over his shoulder with the expression of a man watching a situation deteriorate. The argument between them had the rhythmic structure of something long-standing. Not a fight, not exactly. More like a conversation that had been interrupted and resumed so many times it had developed its own grammar. "It's not a sandwich if the bread is upright," Marsh said. "A hot dog is bread wrapped around filling. It is definitionally a sandwich," Cole said. "It's a hot dog, which is a type of sandwich. That's not what sandwich means. What does sandwich mean, Felix?" I looked at Reyes. "Is this tactically significant?" "Deeply," he said. "What is the correct position?" He ate another chip. "It's a sandwich." I looked at Cole and Marsh. "It is a sandwich," I confirmed to no one. Reyes nodded. We sat in companionable silence for a moment. This was unexpected. I had not expected to find silence comfortable with a human. The silence with Kethar is a known thing, structured, intentional, weighted with appropriate meaning. This silence was none of those things and somehow still worked. Osei came in from the corridor, rolling her neck the way humans do when they have been still too long. She went to the cooking unit, performed the specific sequence of inputs that produced the coffee compound she drank at all hours, and brought the container to the table. She looked at the chip between my fingers. "He converted you," she said. "The chip has acceptable properties," I said. She smiled. It was a different smile than the one she had deployed in the staging bay. Less performance, more actual content. She wrapped both hands around her coffee container and looked at the table for a moment with an expression I had been cataloging since the first day. Distance, brief and controlled. The look of someone who has left and returned before anyone noticed. She returned. "You did well in the central hub," she said, walking into that without knowing exactly what was going to happen. "I had incomplete information," I said. "Step 3. Step 3, she agreed. There was something warm in the way she said it. Not mocking. The warmth of shared experience. I had a question. It was not a tactical question. Among the Kethar, non-tactical questions in professional relationships are discouraged until a formal friendship protocol has been observed over no fewer than 12 shared duty cycles. I had known this unit for 11 days. I asked the question anyway. "Does your unit follow a specific protocol for—" I stopped, started again. "I have observed that your unit discusses soldiers who are no longer present, soldiers who have died. You discuss them as though the distance between them and you is temporary." The table was quiet. Not the aggressive quiet of a mistake, a different kind, the quiet of a thing being carefully picked up. Osei looked at me. "We tell stories about them," she said. "Yes," I said. "I have observed this. I want to understand the purpose." It was Reyes who answered. He had put the chips down. "They lived," he said simply. "They did things. Those things happened. The fact that they're gone doesn't unhappen what they did." I processed this. Among the Kethar, we hold silence for the dead. The silence is a form of respect. "Silence is one way," Osei said. She was looking at her coffee container. "Noise is another." I waited. She looked up. There was a soldier in our previous unit. Her name was Carla Simmons. She stopped. Something moved across her face that she let move without stopping it. She was terrible at directions. In any situation, indoors, outdoors, on a new planet, on a station she'd been on 40 times, she would immediately and confidently walk the wrong way. She paused. She walked the wrong way into a contested corridor 8 months ago, and she didn't walk back out. The table was very quiet. "She walked the wrong way her whole career," Reyes said. "Never once got better at it." Walsh had looked up from her manual. "The thing is," Osei said, "she always found her way eventually. You just had to wait for her. She'd come around the other side looking completely unbothered, like wrong weighing it was a valid tactical approach. A sound came out of her that was not fully a laugh, and not fully the other thing, but somehow both. 8 months and I still look for her when we arrive somewhere new." The silence that followed was not empty, it was full. It held Carla Simmons the way a container holds water. You could not see her, but you could feel the shape of where she was. I looked at Osei's hands around the coffee container, at the dog tags resting against the front of her uniform. She had been touching them intermittently since the first day I met her. Not consciously, the hand rose and fell without apparent direction, the fingers closed around the metal tags for a moment and then released. I had watched this perhaps 40 times before I understood what I was watching. She was not carrying the tags for herself. She was carrying them for someone who could not. I looked at Reyes. He had picked up the chip container again. He was not eating from it. He was just holding it. "Does it help?" I asked. "The telling?" Osei considered this for longer than I expected. She looked at the table. She looked at the tags. She looked at me. "It keeps them in the room," she said. "That's all. It just keeps them in the room with us." I did not have a response. I did not need one, I thought. The answer was complete. It did not require commentary or affirmation. It was a thing said once, whole, with no desire to be added to. We sat at the table. Cole and Marsh had quieted. Park had put his device down. Walsh had closed her manual. They had not been part of the conversation. They had simply been in the room when it happened, and being in the room was enough. This, I understood, was something the Kethar had no protocol for. Not the grief. Grief is universal, but this specific architecture of it. The loud remembering. The laughing at the person's worst quality as a means of loving them most accurately. I reached forward. I took another chip from the container. It was aggressively orange and structurally incorrect, and it made an unreasonable sound when I bit it. I ate it. Reyes noticed. He said nothing. I was learning, skilled at the particular human talent of witnessing something important without making the witnessed person feel witnessed. The common room settled into the warm, low sound of people at rest. Not silent, never quite silent with humans, but something close. Something that had its own texture. I sat in it and let my analytical processes run low for the first time in 11 days. And I thought about the word veth-how and how it required the suppression of everything that was not focus. And I thought that perhaps Kethar tactical philosophy had been built by people who had never sat in a room with Sergeant Dara Osei and learned what it sounds like when you keep someone in a room they can no longer be in. I did not know yet what to do with this thought. I kept it with the thought about step 3, in the growing file of things that had not yet told me what they were. That evening, when the common room had mostly cleared, I asked Reyes the question that had been building since the morning. "The marker," I said. He looked at me. "You write the plan on your forearm." In ink that dissolves. Yeah, you have done this in every operation I have observed. Pretty much. Why the forearm specifically? He turned his arm over and looked at it. The skin there was clean now, 3 days after the last mission. He tilted his head. It's the right distance, he said. You can see it without stopping. You can see it while you're still moving. I looked at my own arm, 4-fingered, heavier, covered in the Kethar gray external layer that sits between skin and the visible world. I thought about the 17 subphases in my internal file system, about how they were completely inaccessible when I was moving through a hostile entry point with incomplete information and someone was pointing a weapon at my face. The plan on your arm, I said slowly, is simpler than the plan in your head. He looked at me with an expression I was beginning to recognize as the one he used when he had something to say but wanted to let you arrive at it yourself. And the plan in your head, I continued, is simpler than the full tactical reality. So the arm has the version that travels. The version that travels, he said. I like that. He handed me the chip container. I took one. I realized, beginning to develop a preference. This was unprecedented. I filed it. The file was getting very full. The mission was called Render Point. The parameters were given to us at 0300, which is a time that humans find objectionable and Kethar find appropriate, because 0300 is when everything that has been held in the day's noise finally becomes quiet enough to be clearly seen. Osei took the briefing without blinking, which meant she had slept badly or not at all. I had not seen her sleep particularly well at any point in the past several weeks. She briefed us in 11 minutes, faster than usual, faster, I noted, than the mission complexity warranted. 3 units had been cut off during a supply route operation in a mountainous low-atmosphere zone, the kind where suits are required, where communication signals bounce off the rock in unreliable directions, and where the extraction window is determined by weather systems that do not consult tactical planning schedules. 23 personnel total. The hostile units that had cut them off were unknown in number, but had established 3 blocking positions along the only viable exit corridor. We were going in, our unit, plus 2 others. We would break the blocking positions from the outside, while the cut-off units pushed through from the inside. The plan was 6 steps. This was progress. Step 4 said, push through the corridor. Step 4 was not Step 3. I was grateful for small improvements. We geared up in the dark. There was less noise than usual. Reyes had his marker. Walsh had her eyes ahead. Cole moved through the gear check with a deliberate slowness that I had learned meant he was building something internal, stacking some kind of readiness that required quiet and time. Marsh stood very straight and blinked several times and then stopped blinking and became still. Osei looked at each of them, one by one, and did not say anything. Looking was enough. She looked at me last. I had been in combat before this assignment. Many times. I am 62 years old in Kethar terms, which is perhaps 45 in the human equivalent, and I have been a tactical officer for 31 of those years. I have been in contested zones. I have been under fire. I have made decisions in fractions of a second that cost lives or saved them. I know what the moment before feels like. I know its specific weight. But standing in that gear room at 0300, looking back at Osei's steady eyes, I felt the weight of it differently. Not heavier, not lighter, different in a way I had no measurement for. By the deep silence, I said quietly. It was the Kethar pre-combat oath. I had not said it aloud to anyone in 11 years. It is considered too personal for company, a thing said inside, to yourself, or to someone you trust entirely. Osei held my gaze for another second. Then she turned to the unit. "Let's go be helpful," Reyes said. No one laughed this time. It was not that kind of moment, but his voice was steady, and steady was what the room needed, and he knew it. The insertion went cleanly. Cold mountain air, rock walls, the eerie medium silence of a low-atmosphere zone, where sound travels strangely, and your own breathing is disproportionately loud. We moved in the compressed, careful way of soldiers operating on difficult ground, step by step, the distance between each member of the unit, exactly what it needed to be. The first blocking position was at a saddle between two ridges. Walsh identified the secondary shooter position before the point unit did. Osei adjusted the approach with two hand signals. The blocking position fell in under 8 minutes. The second was harder. We lost time at the second. The terrain funneled us into a narrower approach than the map had suggested, and what was supposed to take 4 minutes took 11, and 11 minutes in a contested zone is a very long time. Nothing was lost but time was the thing we had least of. The extraction window was weather dependent. The weather, as promised, was not consulting anyone. We reached the outer perimeter of the third blocking position, and the channel crackled. The cutoff units were moving. They had heard us take the first two positions and they were pushing through, which was right, which was what the plan said, except that it was happening 8 minutes earlier than the corridor timing allowed for, which meant they were going to arrive at the third blocking position from the inside while we were still working the outside. "Contact in 4, Walsh said. She had the long-range sensor. She was never wrong about distance. "Third position has 6, Cole said from the point. "At least 6. Osei was doing the math. I could see her doing it the way I could see Walsh doing distances. The small internal calculation that happens behind the eyes and produces an output the rest of the body has to live with. 23 personnel pushing through a contested corridor toward a position we had not yet cleared, with 4 minutes until they arrived. The numbers did not work. I pulled up the terrain model in my internal display. I identified the approach angles. I ran the probability outputs for 4 different resolution scenarios and got 3 outcomes I considered unacceptable and one that required someone to take the right ridge approach solo while the rest of the unit took the left, which would split our firepower but divide the blocking position's attention. "Right ridge," I said to Osei. "I take it. You take left. The position splits its response." She looked at the terrain. "1 second. Go," she said. I went. The ridge was not pleasant terrain. Loose rock, a grade that pushed my legs hard, the kind of surface that punishes speed by offering none of it. I moved as fast as the ground allowed. Behind me I heard the unit begin the left approach, the sounds of contact beginning, the specific acoustic texture of a contested position suddenly finding itself engaged from 2 directions at once. 12 minutes later the third position was neutralized. 14 minutes after that, 23 people came through the corridor, in poor condition, moving fast, carrying 2 of their number, because those 2 could not walk. We moved to the extraction point. The weather window, as it turned out, was already in the process of closing. What had been a 90-minute window was now 40 minutes, because weather systems in low-atmosphere mountain terrain move according to their own schedules, and our schedule was not among their concerns. The primary craft came in and took the cutoff units and 12 members of the combined extraction force. The weight limits were not flexible. The craft was atmospheric rated but not heavily, and the mountain air was thin, and the load calculations were what they were. I ran the numbers. They had the specific quality of numbers that produce outcomes you do not want. Osei ran them too. I watched her face. "Second craft in 22 minutes, she said. "We hold the extraction point." We held. The weather came in from the north, in the particular slow way of weather that is absolutely certain of where it is going. The sky changed color, the temperature dropped. The wind picked up its pace and the sound of it off the rocks became a continuous low note. 18 minutes. The channel crackled. The second craft was inbound but the window was compressing. Pilot's voice, calm and specific. 15 minutes. Then the weather makes the decision for everyone. That was when Reyes's channel opened. He was 40 meters back down the corridor. His voice was completely level. "I've got Marsh," he said. "He's down. I need 2 minutes." I looked at Osei. She was already looking back down the corridor. Marsh had been steady throughout. Too steady. The kind of steady that is performed rather than genuine. And something had happened to him in the final section of the corridor. Not a wound, not a physical injury, a thing inside him that had been held too long finally releasing in the wrong direction. He had gone down. Reyes had stayed with him. They were 40 meters back. The window was 15 minutes and compressing. The second craft was inbound and would not wait. Every tactical protocol I had ever learned told me the calculation. Distance, time, weather, load limits. The arithmetic was not ambiguous. Osei was looking back down that corridor. "Sergeant," I said. My voice was careful. "The window." "I hear you," she said. She kept looking at the corridor. "Sergeant, the extraction window will not hold for." She was moving. Back down the corridor. Walking first, then faster. Her movement had the quality of a thing decided not in the moment, but long before the moment. A decision so embedded in who she was that it did not require the present to make it. I stood at the extraction point for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time when you are counting them. I followed her. The 40 meters felt like different math in motion. Reyes had Marsh against the rock wall on the left side. Marsh sitting and breathing in the deliberate, conscious way of someone relearning how to use a basic function. Reyes looked up when we arrived, his face doing something complicated with the emotion of having been waited for. "Can he move?" Osei said. "Yes," Marsh said, before Reyes could answer. His voice was thinner than usual, but it was there. "Then move," she said. She got under his left side. Reyes took the right. I took the position 3 steps ahead, facing back, because the corridor behind us was cleared, but cleared does not mean permanently cleared. We moved. 40 meters. The wind had increased. The sky was a color that weather sensors flag as critical. We came back into the extraction point with 4 minutes showing on the window. The second craft was visible, coming in low and fast, the pilot making the kind of approach that requires everything and leaves nothing for error. We loaded. The craft went up hard and fast, the mountain falling away below, the weather closing the gap behind us like a door. The pressure of the ascent was aggressive, and no one spoke for the first 90 seconds because no one had the spare capacity for it. When the craft leveled out and the sound of the wind fell away below us, the cabin was quiet in the way that follows things that nearly did not happen. I looked at my hands. They were steady. Cathar, do not shake. Our physiological response to adrenaline does not produce tremor, but there is a Cathar equivalent, an internal vibration at the cellular level that follows high-stress events and takes approximately 8 minutes to fully resolve. I was at 6 minutes. Marsh had his eyes closed and his breathing was slow and deliberate and returning to its normal depth. Reyes sat beside him with his forearm resting on his knee. The marker ink was completely gone. The skin was clean. I looked at Osei across the cabin. She was looking at me. She did not say anything. Neither did I. But something passed between us in the look. Not a frequency, not a secret, something more like recognition. The particular recognition of two people who have both just chosen the same thing when the choosing was expensive. When the cabin settled into travel rhythm, and I was certain my cellular vibration had resolved, I asked her. "The calculation," I said. "You ran it." "Yes," she said. "The numbers were clear." "Yes," she said again. "Then why?" "Because he would have," she said. She said it the way she had said things before, without apology, without the softening of someone who is uncertain. Simply, as if it were the only logical conclusion a person could reach if they had all the relevant information. I sat with this for the rest of the flight, because he would have, not because the numbers allowed it, not because the protocol said so, because Reyes, if their positions had been reversed, would have gone back, and because that fact, that simple, non-mathematical, completely uncalculable fact, was the only number that mattered to her. I thought about the Kether assembly, the 17 subphases, the 42 contingency trees, the extensive and meticulously maintained tactical database that had been built by 60 years of Kether strategic thinking. Nowhere in that database was there an entry for this. Nowhere in our entire military philosophy was there a word for fighting beside someone, because they would have fought beside you. Not duty, not honor by protocol, something else. Something that did not have a name because we had never needed to name it, because we had never understood that it was a thing separate from duty, a thing that could walk back down a corridor when duty said stay at the extraction point. I needed a word for it. I did not have one yet, but I had 8 hours of flight time, and I had the feeling that I was going to spend all of them on the problem. The Cathar High Tribunal meets in the Chamber of First Light, a formal name for a room that earns it. The chamber is built from a white stone that exists only on the Cathar homeworld, a stone that absorbs light during the day and releases it slowly through the dark hours. By morning, when the tribunal traditionally convenes, the walls glow with the accumulated illumination of everything the stone has held overnight. I stood inside it, and it felt smaller than it used to. Not literally. The chamber is what it has always been, high-ceilinged, resonant, designed for the specific acoustics of formal Cathar speech, which requires the voice to carry across space without rising in volume. I had stood in it many times. I had given formal reports in it. I had received commendations in it. Early in my career, when I was still accumulating the kind of record that produces commendations. It felt smaller because I had been somewhere else, and the somewhere else had been very large. 7 elders sat in the raised arc of the tribunal bench. Elder Sathar presided at the center, oldest among them, silver-gray at the edges, still sharp in the particular way of Cathar elders who have earned their positions not through age alone, but through the compound intelligence of having survived everything age brings. He had known my service record for 20 years. He had been one of the voices that sent me to Joint Cooperative Unit 7. He watched me approach the speaking floor with the expression of someone who has already reached several conclusions and is waiting to see how accurate they are. I had the marker in my hand. I had not planned to bring it. I had packed it without entirely deciding to, the way you carry something that your hands know belongs in your possession even when your mind has not formally agreed. It was Osei's spare. She had pressed it into my hand at the staging bay 6 days earlier, when I boarded the transfer craft back to Cathar space. She had not explained why. I had not asked. I had put it in my pocket. It was there now, in my right hand, loose at my side, not displayed. Elder Sathar opened the formal session with the traditional phrase. I made the traditional response. The protocol was exactly as I had left it. The chamber held its long silence for the appropriate beats. Then he said, "Report on the human joint operation. Full assessment." I had prepared this report. I had prepared 2 versions of it, in fact. The one that the tribunal expected, and the one that was true. They were not entirely different documents. They shared a structure, a set of facts, a timeline of operations. They diverged in their conclusions, significantly and in ways that the tribunal would notice. I had decided, somewhere between the mountain extraction and this chamber, which version I was going to give. I opened with the timeline, the platform extraction, the parameters, the execution, the outcome. 11 personnel recovered, 0 losses. I gave the statistics with the precision that formal report requires. The elders listened without expression. This is what Cathar formal listening looks like, not coldness, not disinterest, but the specific discipline of withholding response until the complete information has been received. I told them about the 4-step plan. I described it without editorializing. I let the fact of its brevity exist without my opinion of it, because my opinion of it had changed twice since I first encountered it, and the version of my opinion that was currently true was not the version that would be easiest to explain. I moved to the corridor operation, the cutoff units, the 3 blocking positions, the compressed window. I reported the tactical decisions made under pressure, including my own, the ridge approach, the solo action, the reason for it. Then I reached the point in the report where the 2 versions diverged. I want to describe, I said, what I observed in the human unit's operational psychology, not their tactics, their psychology. A small movement among the elders, not quite surprise. Cathar elders do not show surprise, by training if not by nature, but a slight recalibration of attention. Human soldiers, I said, operate under a shared assumption that has no equivalent in Cathar tactical doctrine. They assume, individually and collectively, that no member of the unit will be left behind, not as a protocol, not as a preference, as an axiom, a foundational thing that does not bend under pressure, because it is not a rule they are following. It is a thing they are. 2.1. The chamber was very quiet. I observed this axiom in operation 3 separate times in the course of this assignment, I continued. In each instance, when the tactical calculation indicated that a personnel recovery was inadvisable or impossible, the human unit commander made the recovery anyway, not in defiance of the mission, as an expression of it. Elder Sath R spoke for the first time. This sounds like compromised tactical decision-making. It sounds like that, I agreed. From outside it, it sounds precisely like that. A pause. From inside it, I said, it looks like something else. Another movement among the elders. This one was different. I had their complete attention now, not the formal attentiveness of a tribunal in session, but the sharper, more personal attention of people who have heard something they did not expect and are deciding what to do with it. The human tactical model, I said, is not built on optimal outcomes. It is built on recoverable ones. There is a difference. An optimal outcome is achieved by making the best decision with available information. A recoverable outcome is achieved by ensuring that there is always someone left who can make a decision at all. End quote. I let this sit for a moment. The human calculation prioritizes unit survival as a capacity rather than mission success as an event. They lose more individual engagements. They continue to be available for subsequent engagements. The math works differently, but it works. Elder Draveth, the second from the right, leaned forward a fraction. You are suggesting we adopt human tactical models? I am suggesting we understand them, I said. There is a gap between those two things, and I am not attempting to cross it without invitation. This was the kind of answer that the tribunal appreciates. Specific, careful, bounded. I saw the fractional release of some tension I had not realized had been accumulating in the room. Elder Sathar looked at me steadily. The humans, their reliability, in the field. High, I said. Unconventionally high. Their individual decision-making under pressure is inconsistent by Kethar standards. Their collective reliability under the same pressure is the highest I have encountered in 3 decades of joint operations. Because of this axiom, I confirmed. A silence, the kind with weight. Then Elder Sathar asked the question I had been waiting for. He had the specific quality of waiting that tells you a question has been prepared long before the moment it is asked. Are they controllable? He said. I held the marker in my right hand. I was aware of it the way you are aware of something that does not belong in a room but is present in it regardless. Its presence a fact that precedes explanation. The pause I gave to his question was not calculated. It arrived of its own accord, the way honest pauses do, the body knowing it needs a moment before the mind has agreed to take one. No, I said. The chamber absorbed this. That is precisely why we need them beside us, I said. Elder Sathar looked at me. He was not angry. He was, if I was reading the micro-expressions of a face I had known for 20 years with any accuracy, thinking, actually thinking, not performing the appearance of it. Explain that, he said. Every tactical opponent we have faced in the last 4 decades, I said, has modeled our behavior and planned against it. They know Kethar doctrine. They know our 17 subphases. They know our contingency trees, because our contingency trees are rational, and rational things can be anticipated. I paused. A unit that operates on an axiom rather than a protocol cannot be fully modeled. A unit whose step 3 is open cannot be planned against with complete confidence. A unit that will go back when the calculation says stay cannot be used as a known variable. They are unpredictable, Elder Draveth said. A note in his voice that was not quite disapproval and not quite curiosity. They are unpredictable, I said, in the same way that weather is unpredictable. You can observe it. You can plan around it. You cannot control it, and any tactical model that depends on controlling it will fail. I looked at the arc of faces above me. Our opponents know this. This is why human units have been deployed against high-priority targets that Kethar tactical models rated as unrecoverable. Not because humans are more capable, because they are less predictable. And predictability, in contested space, is a vulnerability we have been carrying for a very long time." End quote. The chamber held my words. Elder Sathar looked at the marker in my hand. He had noticed it from the beginning. He was too experienced to have not noticed it. He had been waiting to see if I would address it. I looked at it too. When I arrived at the human unit, I said, I observed their commanding sergeant plan a combat operation on a 4-step outline. One of her soldiers wrote those steps on his forearm in temporary ink. I held the marker up slightly. Not a dramatic gesture, just an honest one. I thought it was disorganized. I thought it was careless. I thought it was the approach of a species that did not take military discipline seriously enough to maintain a proper planning architecture. I lowered my hand. I was wrong on all 3 counts. The temporary ink is the point. The arm is the point. The plan you can read while still moving is the only plan that survives contact with reality. A long silence. "I have been Kethar Tactical Doctrine for 31 years, I said. "I am not asking you to abandon it. I am asking you to consider that there is a kind of strength we have not catalogued, a kind that does not look like strength from the outside, that laughs before a fight, that writes on its own skin, that goes back down a corridor when the numbers say otherwise." I paused. I could not name this quality when I arrived at the joint unit. I have spent the past months attempting to find the right Kethar word for it. "And?" Elder Sathar said. I looked at the marker. I thought about Ose, going back down the corridor. I thought about Reyes, holding the chip container. I thought about a name on a pair of dog tags, carried by someone who was not that name, so that the name did not have to travel alone. "There is no Kethar word for it," I said. "I made one." The chamber waited. "Veth Soa," I said. The new word, the one I had built on a transport craft, at altitude, with 8 hours and a growing file of things that had not yet told me what they were, until all at once they told me together. In Kethar, Veth means the state of a warrior in readiness. Soa means the thing given freely when nothing requires the giving. Together, they become something that had not needed to exist before I met 11 humans in a staging bay who laughed before a fight. The willingness to go back, not the duty to. The willingness. The elders were quiet with it. Elder Sathar looked at the word the way you look at something you are still deciding how to handle. "This word," he said, "you created it for humans." "I created it because of humans," I said. "I think it may describe something that was always possible for us. We simply had no occasion to need the word for it before." The session formally concluded 19 minutes later. The elders withdrew for consultation as protocol requires. I was told a formal response to my recommendations would follow within 10 cycles. I stood in the chamber of first light alone for a moment. The walls still held their overnight glow. I had stood in this room many times and always found it correctly impressive, the right dimensions for the gravity of what happened inside it. Today it felt like a room I was leaving. The transfer craft back to the joint staging facility took 6 hours. I used 5 of them on the debrief documentation that formal Kethar reporting requires. I used the last one looking at the cloud formations below the craft's flight path. The staging facility appeared at 1400 hours, standard time. I came through the main bay and down the corridor to the common area, because the unit's location was logged as common area, and I had learned, over the past months, that common area coordinates for this specific unit were accurate and reliable in a way that military coordinates often are not. Osei was at the far table. She had a coffee container. She was looking at something on her field tablet, but she looked up when I came through the door, because she had the particular quality of awareness that does not switch off simply because the current moment does not require it. She looked at me. She did not ask how it went. 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 She did not. She simply looked at me with those dark, assessing eyes that I had been reading with increasing accuracy since the first day in the staging bay, and I read what was in them now, the question, and underneath the question, the answer she had already calculated was most likely, and underneath that, the thing she would do regardless of which answer arrived. I crossed the common area and sat down at the table. She returned to her tablet. I reached into my pocket and set her marker on the table between us. She picked it up without looking, turned it between her fingers once, set it back down. "Good," she said. Reyes came in from the corridor with the chip container. He looked at me, then at the table, then at Osei. He did a very human calculation in about 2 seconds and arrived at the correct conclusion without requiring further data. He sat down. He opened the container. He set it in the center of the table. I reached forward. I took one. Outside the staging facility window, the sky was a color that weather sensors would file under acceptable conditions, nominal visibility, standard operating parameters. The kind of day that does not announce itself, the kind that happens around whatever the actual thing is. I sat in the common area with Osei and Reyes and the aggressively orange chips, and I thought about the chamber of first light and its accumulated glow, and I thought about a word I had made in the dark at altitude, and I thought about what it means to be 62 years old in Kethar, and to have stood in more rooms and more battles than most species manage in a full civilization's run, and to find, in a staging bay with laughing strangers and temporary ink, something that all of that time had not yet found. By the deep silence they never asked to be respected. I have understood this since the corridor, since the markers, since the dog tags and the stories told out loud, and the good chips, and the 4 steps, and the going back. They simply acted, in every situation I placed them in every calculation I ran that said they would stop, as though the stopping point did not exist, as though the only direction was forward, or back toward the people who needed them, which is the same direction if you understand what forward means. I have stood in the cold light of 100 suns. I have served at the highest levels of Kethar Tactical Command. I have bent my knee to no living thing, because Kethar officers of my rank do not bend their knees, because the protocol does not require it, because in 62 years nothing has ever asked it of me in a way that I could not decline. I bent it once, to a sergeant who went back down a corridor that the numbers said was finished. She was not watching when I did it. She did not know. The gesture was not for her to receive, it was for me to give, and there is a difference, and the difference is the whole of the word I made. Veth Soa. She would not recognize the word. She does not speak Kethar. But she knows the thing, because she has always known the thing, because whatever it is that humans carry into every terrible situation they put themselves in, they did not learn it. They arrived with it, fully formed and entirely impractical, and more powerful than anything in my tactical database, which spans 60 years and 40 worlds and has never once, not in any version I have consulted, told me what to do with people who laugh before a fight and go back for each other and keep the dead in the room by making noise. I am adding a new section. I have been authorized by Elder Sathar to do so. His formal response arrived on the 3rd cycle, 6 days after the tribunal session. It was 3 paragraphs. The 3rd paragraph said, in the specific Kethar formal phrasing that means we are not agreeing with you and we are not disagreeing with you, we are observing that you have seen something and we are choosing to look at what you saw. The word is noted. The filing is accepted. The recommendation for expanded joint operational protocols is under active review. Under active review, in Kethar, means it will happen. I will be here when it does. At the table in the common area, most likely. With the chips in the center. With Osei and her coffee and her dog tags, and her eyes that have already run the calculation and arrived at the answer that the numbers cannot produce. The window outside has light in it the color of early evening. Walsh is reading. Cole and Marsh are in a new argument, whose subject I have not yet identified but will. Park has his device. Reyes is at the end of the table, cap off the marker, writing something on his forearm with the cheerful confidence of someone who has never once been wrong about the things that actually matter. This is what it looks like. This small, Loud, orange-dusted, ink on skin, noise instead of silence, going back anyway thing that they have. This is what I came to report on and could not, in the end, contain in a report. This is what it costs to fight beside them. This is what it is worth.